Obama gave a Castro-like, Chavez-like speech today, pretending to be Theodore Roosevelt. We talked at great length yesterday about what he was going to say, even before we knew exactly what he was going to say. But we hit it out of the park as usual. Obama loads up his speech, loads it up with heavy-duty redistribution of wealth propaganda, once again attacking our society, attacking our system, and claiming to represent the quote-unquote middle class. Obama has done more damage to the middle class in the last 3 years than any president in my lifetime, and to their children and grandchildren. Now, let me set the stage here, because his speech is very annoying, and yet it's helpful, because it lays down the differences, crystallizes them. Obama's talking about a speech that Theodore Roosevelt gave, I believe, in 1912. You know, what's fair? And the middle class, which he mentioned, I am told, at least 24 times. This is what he does. It's the repetition which the propagandists tell you have an effect on the way people think. Just keep repeating the big lie, and at some point it'll be accepted. Now, the 16th Amendment, the progressive federal income tax, wasn't even instituted until 1913, after Roosevelt gave his speech. So there was no federal income tax when Theodore Roosevelt gave his speech about the need for government intervention and so forth. There was no massive welfare state. So Obama pretends that the last 100 years didn't happen, including the 3 years of his disastrous presidency. So why should we pretend with him? In other words, ladies and gentlemen, you really have to rewrite history or ignore it in order to be a leftist. Because what history shows you is how preposterous their promises and their proposals are. They're unworkable. They're impossible. So the 16th Amendment was adopted, ratified by the states, I should say, after Roosevelt gave this speech that has so inspired Obama. There was no massive welfare state, as I said yesterday. There was no Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, unemployment insurance. There was no food stamps. Almost no social welfare to speak of. Today, 25% of the gross domestic product goes to the federal government. I'm not even including the states and localities. 25%. 25 cents of every dollar created in the private sector goes to the federal government. Directly. Another 11% goes to complying with federal regulations. By my count, that's 36% of the private sector economy is used to fund the federal government or to comply with federal regulations. The gross domestic product this year will be $15 trillion. The federal debt this year will be $15 trillion, excluding unfunded obligations for entitlements. That's a dollar for dollar, or 100% of what the private sector creates is the same amount that the federal government is in debt, not counting entitlements. And in the last 3 years alone under this president, $4 trillion was added to that federal debt. $4 trillion. And under his existing policies, if nothing at all changes, approximately $9.5 trillion more dollars will be added to the federal debt, meaning in 10 years, our federal debt will be approximately $25 trillion, excluding entitlements. The interest on the debt will consume a huge percentage of the federal budget in just 10 years. And Obama's given a speech in rural Kansas as if he's Theodore Roosevelt, saying he represents the middle class. Who do you think's going to be affected by this? We don't have enough millionaires and billionaires to be affected by this. I mean, they'll be affected, but the vast majority of the American people. These counter-revolutions, this counter-revolution against the American Revolution, this is what I've called it for years. This is what I explain in Ameritopia, among other places. This counter-revolution is aimed at you. They have to take down the population of the country, not the millionaires and billionaires. That's easy stuff. There's not enough of them. They've got to take down you. We've got millions and millions of people who are unemployed. They're not millionaires and billionaires. Those are working people. We have millions of people. 45 million or something like that on food stamps. Those aren't millionaires and billionaires. We have people who are underwater on their mortgages. Regular Americans. He wants to keep talking about millionaires and billionaires. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not a mathematician. Clearly, Obama's not either. He says he wants to give each of you $1,000 in tax cuts on the payroll cut, rather than have you contributed to Social Security. And he thinks he's very clever. He wants millionaires and billionaires. Actually, he wants anybody or any business that earns over $500,000 to pay it to the federal government. Here's the problem. None of that's going to be used to offset the taking from Social Security. They're just going to piss it away like they always do. There's no dollar-for-dollar match here. But let's even put all that aside. I've attacked this in many ways, as I did yesterday and before. What's $1,000? Over a year, it's less than $20 a week. If you divide the number of days into a year, it's less than $3 a day. Let me ask you a question. Is that what your integrity is worth? Less than $3 a day? Listening to this guy run around and make a fool out of himself? He's telling you that he can buy your vote and buy your support for less than $3 a day. Let's cut right to the chase. Can he? I don't think so. That's what he thinks it costs to get your support, less than $3 a day. While he's attacking millionaires and billionaires, he's attacking you. Then I got to thinking, let me do a little research here. I wonder if Hugo Chavez, the well-known pathetic communist in Venezuela who's been destroying that country, maybe he wanted to give a Theodore Roosevelt speech. I don't know. That he believes, as Obama does, in spreading the wealth. Obama said he believes in spreading the wealth. He's at war with millionaires and billionaires, too. And big business. And as a result, his country is poorer and poorer. But, ladies and gentlemen, minimal amount of research, I found that a few months ago, well, actually a few more, in April of this year, Hugo Chavez decided to reverse course, to cool it with the communist rhetoric, and to reach out to the middle class. Venezuela President Hugo Chavez, April 2011, has made an abrupt political shift, urging his socialist movement to reach out to the middle class and small business owners. He appeared to be taking a more moderate stance to try to expand his support ahead of the presidential election in late 2012. In a telephone call broadcast on state television, he said his party should seek to recapture middle-class support. Such support has waned over the years amid the government's expropriations of businesses, farmland, and residential buildings, as well as expanding price controls viewed by many as a threat to the economy. Quote, "We can't give away the middle class to the bourgeoisie," Chavez said, referring to the opposition. He said his government has no plans to expropriate small businesses, adding we have to open ourselves up to those sectors, the private productive sector. Chavez has had tense relations with the country's business leaders during his more than 12 years in office. He has accused business leaders of defending capitalism, identifying them as obstacles to his socialist movement. But he said today, we have to reflect and introduce changes in our stances and in our actions, urging supporters to eradicate what he called political evils. For example, sectarianism and dogmatism. The president, whose signature red shirts have long been a symbol of his socialist movement, also suggested his allies ought to be more moderate in their wardrobes. Stop wearing the red shirts. Chavez, April, suddenly representing the middle class that was turning against him. And Obama, 8 months later, suddenly pretending that he represents the middle class and their needs. Fairness, you know. While he's massively increasing the size, the reach, and the destructive power of the federal government. We have a country club Marxist. Oh, yes. He wants to tell us how much we should earn, who should get what kind of skin we should have in the game, and then off to the links. Or maybe it's a 17-day vacation in Hawaii. Or maybe it's a 10 or 11-day vacation in Martha's Vineyard. You never know. Man's very busy telling us what to do as he goes off and has a grand old time as our president. So here he is in Kansas, Osawatomie. I know that's how you pronounce it because somebody told me. Osawatomie High School in Kansas today about fairness. Here's a montage. And just remember, we do these montages because on the left, the propagandists tell you just keep repeating it, and repeating it. Cut one, go.
I believe that this country succeeds when everyone gets a fair shot, when everyone does their fair share. Restore balance, restore fairness. When there are rules of the road that ensure competition is fair. When everyone engages in fair play and everybody gets a fair shot and everybody does their fair share. Well, it starts by making sure that everyone in America gets a fair shot at success. By asking everybody to do their fair share. That is the height of unfairness. Everybody would benefit from a country in which everyone gets a fair chance.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, he's concerned about fairness. Oh, yes, that's why he wants to drive up electricity prices. That's why he's putting hardworking Americans out of work who work in coal mines and oil fields and places like that. That's why he's shutting down hospitals, and that's why he took $500 billion out of Medicare and now wants to raid the Social Security so-called trust fund. Fairness. Let me tell you a little secret. You know what this is a prescription for? A police state. What does he mean by fairness? Have you noticed he never really defines it? What is fairness? Play by the same rules. Does Trumpka, the head of the AFL-CIO, play by the fair rules, the same rules? Just curious. Does Obama play by the rules when he runs around campaigning on our dime, when nobody else running for president can? Fairness. Fairness, like the word reform. These are words that the leftist uses to persuade you that they're looking out for you, when in fact they're destroying everything around you. Fairness. Let's say you work harder than the guy next door. Is it fair that you earn the same amount of money, that you live in the same type of home? Is it fair that you should pay more in taxes if you work harder than the guy next door and earn more? Why is that fair? Who says? I don't know. Is it fair that people who really don't and shouldn't qualify for home mortgages get them because the government directs the banks and the mortgage companies to do it? And then when they go under, you and I have to pay for that? Is that fair? Is it fair that somebody else pays your Social Security contribution under the payroll tax? Why should they? What's fair about that? Is it fair that liberals squander tens of billions of your dollars through phony solar businesses and green jobs that never exist? Is that fair? Is it fair that they nationalized GM and Chrysler and threw out the longtime investors, many of whom lost everything? Was that fair? What's this fairness Obama speaks about? Why is it that socialism is fair and capitalism isn't? I don't know. Capitalism rewards the individual, private property rights. intellectual and physical labor. Socialism rewards what? Government, bureaucrats, politicians. And people who don't perform. I'll be right back.